I was lucky enough earlier in the game that Jared Verse had blocked a field goal.
Right.
And he had raised his hand. The guy that blocked it usually is running raising his hand like he got it. And so Verse did that earlier in the game. And I'm trying to find somebody on the field in the middle of the celebration that's looking similar. And Shaheem Brown is running down the LSU sideline with guys chasing him, and he's got his hand in the air. And I just went with it.
Yeah.
Could have been wrong. Could have been somebody else, but I just
Right.
trusted it, and I went with it. There was so much going on. And I said, Shaheem Brown got his mitt on it, and then I went to fire up the war chant and plant the spear. Noles win. Noles win. Shaheem Brown's the hero. Mike Norvell, here's your signature win early on in non-conference play. You're not going to keep the Noles off of Bourbon Street tonight, baby. You know? And there it was.
Right. That's awesome. From Fiore Communications, it's How I Got Here, a show of inspiring stories from Tallahassee area leaders, business owners, and neighbors, all the challenges, opportunities, inspirations, the twists and turns of life that led them to where they are today. Everyone has a story worth telling, and I am really grateful that we get to bring a few of them to you. I truly have been changed by my conversations with these amazing people, and I'm confident you will be too. I'm Dave Fiore, and in this episode, I speak with Jeff Culhane, the Director of Broadcasting for Learfield's Seminole Sports Properties and the voice for Florida State football and men's basketball. Jeff brings 20 years of multimedia experience to the Seminoles, including broadcasting duties for Nebraska, West Virginia, and North Dakota State. As part of his duties, he creates original video and audio content that highlights student athletes and coaches. Jeff was born and raised in small-town Mitchell, South Dakota, where he grew up around a large extended family, lifelong friends, and a house full of radios that served as a window to the world, especially for local sports. A three-sport athlete in high school who preferred basketball, Jeff went on to play college football and baseball at Dakota Wesleyan University, where he earned a degree in business management and marketing before pursuing his broadcasting career. Jeff was enjoying great success at perennial powerhouse North Dakota State University when he learned about the FSU opening when Gene Deckerhoff announced his retirement on Facebook. He quickly used his relationships in the broadcasting world to get himself on the radar in Tallahassee. Now entering his second year as the voice of the Seminoles, Jeff is settling into Tallahassee life with his wife and his two young sons and making his own name, representing one of the most iconic brands in all of sports. All right, so you were born and raised in Mitchell, South Dakota.
Big city.
Big city. That's near Sioux Falls, right?
It is. Hour west on I-90. Yeah,
Okay.
Corn Palace.
So tell us about Mitchell. What kind of place is that?
Sure. Small town living. 15,000 people. I went to college in Mitchell as well, so that was where I grew up for the first 22 years of my life. And, my dad grew up in Mitchell. He still lives in Mitchell. He's lived there his entire life. That's where he and my mom obviously have lived since they were in their mid-20s. I want to say early 80s they moved to Mitchell, South Dakota. He grew up there, went to college, and then came back. So there were a few years where he wasn't there, but it's been his home forever. A really crazy high school basketball town, big basketball town in the state of South Dakota. And so you grew up wanting to be a Mitchell Colonel, and that's a corn kernel, not an Army colonel, right?
With a K?
Yeah, with the K, because of the venue, the Corn Palace, which is the tourism historical landmark in our hometown right on Main Street.
All right, well, you've talked about it some, but kind of when you look back on your childhood there and growing up, I imagine you were with a lot of the same kids your whole school life?
Yeah. I had a lot of the same friends, Dave, from kindergarten all the way through.
Yeah.
And played traveling basketball and baseball with the same guys from fifth grade on, and my dad was my coach, along with a friend of mine.
So
His
what was
father
that like?
a
I mean,
coach.
what do you think about when you look back on those years and having that kind of community and the same kids and experiencing all that stuff with your friends throughout your childhood?
I think growing up in the town with the kids that I grew up with, it really helped me turn into who I am today, to be honest, along with my dad. coaching and pushing, and constant, not constantly, but continually wanting me to find ways to get better. There was really never a time where you were allowed to say, well, that's good enough. You certainly celebrated your successes, right? But it was always looking ahead to what's the next thing. And I was someone that I wanted to play in every professional sports league as a young boy that I could. The NBA, the NFL, Major League Baseball, I wanted to find a way. I love sports, love playing them, love going to games, love listening to them on the radio, love watching TV, watching them on TV. And so a huge part of my life, it was my life. Sports were my life, and it was a great town to kind of grow up and learn along the way through sports how you got to deal with success, you got to deal with failure. Even if you work as hard as you ever worked, it doesn't guarantee you anything from a success standpoint. And so that's why I think sports are great. And there are so many teaching tools in there and learning tools to help you kind of find your way. And I guess I would say that a lot of those experiences with those people helped me find my way, and also, kind of develop me into who I am now in dealing with success and failure, and continually trying to, what's the next thing? How do I get better? You don't want to stay kind of where you're at. You want to keep moving and doing the things that can help you improve in a lot of ways.
Sure. So what were the family dynamics outside of sports with your mom and dad? Did you have siblings?
Yeah, one sister. Her name's Jen. She is actually getting married in the fall. She has 3 kids, 3 great kids, Joey, Julia, Jayla. She lives in the Twin Cities. She was into sports and went to college initially for volleyball, was an excellent player. And, the experiences, big families. Dad's side had, I believe he had 8 siblings, 9 total kids.
Wow.
Irish Catholic family. Grandparents were outstanding. In fact, I just got back from a family reunion on Lake Michigan with that side of the family. It's always a great group. Mom's side, another big family. They lived on a farm in a small town in north central South Dakota named Gettysburg. There was a big sign when you enter town that said "Where the battle wasn't" was the slogan for the town.
Like it. Yeah.
And so you had a little bit of both. You had small town living. You also went up and you spent time on the farm and kind of understood those values of work and respect and how you treat people, and just had a lot. I'm blessed to say I have a great family and people that supported you in any way you needed it along the way growing up, which is something not everybody can say.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right, and your dad was also in radio, right?
Yeah, so my dad, he's actually retiring. Congratulations to him. Looking forward to seeing him down here more and more. He's retiring from his full-time job. He's the business manager of the Mitchell School District in Mitchell, South Dakota at the end of June. But growing up, he did some radio. He enjoyed being around, big sports guy himself. He worked in radio doing the analyst work for our high school basketball team. He also was a public address announcer at the Corn Palace and at football and baseball with me and growing up. And he was a public address announcer for my high school games, college games, right? So
was there a big dramatic intro production thing?
Probably just the opposite for me. I can tell a fun story where we weren't playing well in a game, basketball game, and he was right there, and he made sure to let me know that we weren't playing well as I crossed midcourt going the other way.
As
he
the
was
PA announcer?
sitting right there, not over the mic,
no,
but he was, he's got a voice where it certainly travels, right? And so he made sure to let us know that we needed to pick it up in his own way. But he was, one thing about my house, Dave, is for whatever reason, the radio was always on. And so every room you were in, growing up, it's 7 a.m. or whatever time it is you're getting ready, radio is on in parents' bedroom, radio is on in the kitchen. And so I always had the radio and got to listen every day. Mm-hmm. And radio ingrained itself in me at a young age. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. I thought the broadcasters, the on-air guys were funny and great, and they all had an impact on me, and we'd always listen to the games. Obviously, growing up in the Dakotas in the 80s and 90s, you don't have a pro team. You don't have a Division I team that's nearby. So what do you have? You have your high school teams and your small college teams. Those are your teams.
Right. And
your newspapers, and you read the recaps and the previews and the stories. And so we were always listening to the radio because nothing was on TV. No games. There was nothing consistent on TV. So the only consistent thing was radio. So every Friday night, if we're not at the game, we're listening to it when the team's out of town, both high school and college. And we get back in the car following a basketball game, and we're listening to the postgame show. We want to hear the postgame interview with the coach before we get home. And so just always had an impact. And from there, that's kind of where my love, in an indirect way, obviously when you're 7 or 8 years old, you don't know what you want to do with your life, but it sort of started to build in me. And even watching games, then football, basketball, I would watch, but I would also listen. I talk about listening. I would listen to how broadcasters called the games, the words they used, the phrases, all those things then.
Right.
And it just kind of came natural in a lot of ways. And that's kind of where my love for broadcasting started, was at that young age overall.
And the thing about radio play-by-play especially is, with no visual, the play-by-play person is transporting you to that place with every detail, right? You're painting a picture with words. And did that kind of capture your imagination? How you just felt like you were there?
Still does.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's a big part of me challenging myself in any broadcast of any event, is to do that, like you said, to transport that person into where we're at. I always loved hearing the venues. I don't know why, but when I was listening to the high school games growing up, hey, we're here at the Rushmore Plaza Civic Center in Rapid City. I'm thinking, God, I wonder what that'd be cool. The Aberdeen Civic Center, we're at T.F. Riggs High School. And I'm just like, for whatever reason, I felt like I was there. And then I also wanted to know what it felt like to be there.
Right.
What does the venue look like? How many people are there? The colors on the floor, what are the end zones, the designs look like. And so for me, that's how I challenge myself. I think it's important to be able to do that. And I don't think there's any detail you can leave unchecked overall when you're talking about it. Obviously, you don't want to overwhelm people. It can happen with some of that stuff. But I think there's a fine line and a balance with how you describe everything that you're seeing, to do exactly as you talked about, Dave, and bringing people into where we're at and what we're seeing.
Yeah. All right, so in high school you played basketball, which you talked about, but also football.
Baseball, yep, those three. Basketball was the big one. You learn that at 5'11", 6 feet tall, 6'1", whatever it was, that you're not going to play in the NBA. You're probably not going to play college basketball. Basketball is my favorite. Baseball is pretty close. Football was my least favorite for whatever reason, and I think it probably was because I just physically wasn't there as a younger kid, and then I hit my growth spurt and found the weight room, and then all of a sudden I'm like, I'm as big as everyone else is all of a sudden, and football became the sport I played in college. I knew I wanted to be in college athletics, and football was that sport. I played a year of baseball. But football was the one that turned out to be the sport that got me through college, and enjoyed it. Loved being a part of it. Loved being able to say, even at the lowest of levels in the NAIA ranks, that I earned a scholarship and was a college athlete. That was, people asked me then, like, why do you want to play? And I honestly said, I told them, I said, you know what? I want to tell my kids that I played college athletics, because I thought it was just one of those things where, if you're good enough to do that at any level, you've accomplished something.
Oh yeah,
and that's cool. I was at Big 12 Media Days in Kansas City This would have been early on in my career with the Husker Sports Network when I was in Lincoln, Nebraska. And I was talking to Dave Lapham, who was an offensive lineman for the Cincinnati Bengals. He did some TV work and still does the radio with the Bengals. He kind of looked at me. I walked up to him to ask him if he would join us at our table for an interview, and he just looked at me and he goes, "Where'd you play?" I said, "Well, I didn't play." He goes, "Doesn't matter." He goes, "You play college." This is an NFL guy saying that.
Right.
He goes, "You play college sports anywhere." He goes, "That's a big accomplishment."
Sure.
And I thought that stuck with me after he said that. I thought that was pretty cool. So,
so what position did you play?
Started as a quarterback in high school, quarterback and safety. Wanted to be a quarterback in college. That did not work out, so I wanted to play, and I knew that if I didn't make a move, I wouldn't play until my senior year. I'm just like, we're not going to play in the NFL. I'm not sitting here trying to, get a contract somewhere. I'm going to move, and moved over to defense and played defense for the last 3 years in college and played a safety linebacker type. And so that was fun. I'm glad
kind of
I
a
did
Derek
that.
Brooks type guy?
They're not quite to that level overall, but sure. Yeah, I'll take any
He was
sort
fast enough to do whatever he wanted to.
Yeah. I'll take that somewhat connection in a football life way back when.
So were you a drop back passer or dual threat?
Dual threat. Yeah, I can move a little bit by when I say that, by relative comparison to, South Dakota high school football, not Florida high school football.
Sure.
I could hold my own and move a little bit.
They're pretty fast down here.
They're pretty fast. A lot of fast guys. A lot of bigger, faster, stronger guys here than in the upper Midwest.
They get to play all year long.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. But, can move around a little bit, could throw it a little bit, but it was a fun experience, that's for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah. And this was at Dakota Wesleyan, right?
Dakota Wesleyan, yeah, small Methodist college in my hometown. In fact, the enrollment of the college was smaller than my high school enrollment.
All right, so what did you get your degree in?
Not in broadcasting. It was in business management and marketing. I had a minor in computers. And so, I think it was around probably my sophomore, junior year where I started to really think about what I wanted to do for a career. I got asked when I was 18 in the fall of my freshman year of college to be the color analyst on our high school boys basketball broadcast for one of the stations in town that called the games, or two of them that did them. That's how popular it was. It wasn't just one, it was two that did the games in a town of 14,000 people.
And one of them was K-O-R-N.
K-O-R-N. Corn, yes,
how
exactly.
could I not know that? Right?
We got a theme here on the pod today. And so for me, I thought I was calling the NCAA tournament because I'm straight out of high school. It was my dream to, at that time, grow up and play for Mitchell High School boys basketball. And then I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to be on the radio.
You are living the dream.
Yeah. I'm going to be on the radio and people are driving home. And I'm like, yes, I'll absolutely do it. And that was so important to me at that time that it influenced me to stop playing baseball in college because the season was in the first part of the college baseball season.
Right.
Because you're into January, February, March. And we had, like on weekends, our baseball team had events or get-togethers, and I had games. And so, you're trying to ingrain yourself into that program, but all I could think about was I want to go call the game. Like, I don't want to be here, And so when I started...
And you loved playing baseball.
I enjoyed playing baseball, yeah. I did not love walking through a January snowdrift at 5:30 in the morning into a gymnasium to practice baseball. That's what I also figured out. I didn't love baseball.
Right.
I loved it when the sun was out and we were playing outdoors and not practicing indoors, right? But when I got that opportunity, and then it was my sophomore, junior year, I really started to think that this was something I wanted to really do. I wanted to pursue it. I felt like I was good at it. I felt like I had a feel for it. Obviously, I had a ton to learn, but I wanted to learn. I wanted to be around sports. I didn't want to sit in an office and do 8 to 5, 9 to 5, and do that. And so
you were doing color for high school,
and then it moved into play-by-play.
Right.
It developed into some play-by-play for other sports, girls basketball, baseball, filled in then on some boys basketball broadcast, and yeah, really got into it. And
how did it feel? Was it natural to you? I mean, did you really have to work on it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I remember, when you're in college, the what are you thinking about? You're thinking about, I got to get my schoolwork done on time, figure out a way to graduate, but also, where am I going to have my next beverage, on the weekend? And so I remember I'm at one of our bars, and I'm sitting there with a bar napkin drinking a beer. I've got a broadcast that weekend, and I'm writing on the bar napkin my pregame show by myself. And I'm just going through it, and I put it in my pocket. I literally carry that with me for 48 hours.
And whipped it out.
Whipped it out, and there's our format for the pregame show, right?
Yeah.
And so that's kind of how I, as a college student, went about how I was going to do it with no, Newhouse in Syracuse or Northwestern or USC. And
right.
When I let some of the old guys, I call them the old guys that have been doing, sports in South Dakota that you'd run into at venues around the state in different towns, and I told them what I wanted to do. I said, hey, what do you think? Do you think I should go to a Syracuse? Should I go to a Northwestern? And they all just said, you know what? You have what all those guys and gals want right now, and that's experience. You've been doing games for 4 years. Just start working. And so I did, and that was kind of the decision-making process on doing this thing full-time as a young person.
That's awesome. All right, I don't know where this fits into the timeline, but you mentioned your wife, Sarah.
Yeah.
When did you meet her?
So I was in Morgantown, West Virginia from 2013 to 2016. This was after my time in Nebraska. I was there from 2007 to 2013. And I'll try and keep this as short as possible. I got from when I went to Morgantown, it was literally a 2 or 3 week process. And I was connected. I was, it's always, in going back to your very first question, where treat people well, make sure to connect with people. You never know how it's going to help you down the road.
Right.
And Chris Ferris is one of the heads of broadcasting for IMG in Learfield. It's now just Learfield after some of the multiple mergers. And I got to know him when I was at Nebraska and stayed in touch with him and stayed in contact. He reached out to me, Dave, in August of 2013. This is 3 weeks before the start of the college football season, and asked me if I'd be interested in moving to Morgantown, West Virginia. They had just acquired the property. It was a messy situation with the former radio group who'd been doing and producing and broadcasting the game since the 1940s.
Wow.
And so it was a big talking point, and he goes, hey, I need a guy that can get us going with broadcast, that can host, that can be versatile. He goes, I saw you, ironically enough, it was in Orlando in 2012 at the Capital One Bowl at the time when Nebraska played Georgia. I hosted a radio show at BB King's in Orlando in front of 400 or 500 Nebraska fans on a stage and did a 3-hour show with guests and, we're doing it right now. And he saw the whole thing. He goes, I think you have what we need right now. And I loved Lincoln. I love Nebraska. I still have friends there to this day. Still stay in contact and keep tabs on what's going on there. But I knew that with where I wanted to go again and what I needed to do, I had to go to Morgantown. And it literally was middle of August with the first game on August 31st. And I had to be ready to go on the air by the end of the month at West Virginia. And so that's how I got to Morgantown.
Right.
6 weeks later, I meet my future wife in Morgantown, West Virginia.
Okay.
And
how'd you meet?
Yeah, she's a student at the time. 2013, so I was 30 years old. So it was 10 years ago. And there was a wine bar across the street from our offices, and we were so busy trying to get this new property going, this broadcast going, that no time for anything the first month and a half or whatever it was. And I drove by this place every day. I like a glass of red wine from time to time. And I said, you know what? I'm going to go in there. I'd like to go in and just see. It looks like a nice place. And this is a popular place in Morgantown. And for whatever reason, it was on a Thursday night after our football coaches show. And I just kind of said, hey, guys, I'll see you later. I'm going to go check this place out. went in there, and there was nobody in there for whatever reason. Again, very popular place.
Right.
And Sarah was working. And that's where we met. And that's kind of how our connection and our relationship took off. And
so did you keep going back?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm no dating savant by any means, Dave, but I for whatever reason I got this one right with how we talked and how we connected, and I told her, I said, it was a Thursday night. I said, we play at Baylor Saturday. I'm taking a couple of days off during the bye week. I said, when do you work next? And she said, I'll be here next Friday. I said, I'll be back then. And
nice.
So
that's pretty smooth.
I know. I'm not. I don't have that. Trust me. That's not in the cards. For whatever reason, empty restaurant, so there was nobody else in there. No pressure. And I did. I think she believed. She's told me she thought she'd never see me again after that. But I did. I showed up next Friday, and the place was packed. It was full. And she saw me, and I think I scared her because I, probably came up and she
it's
see
me.
Yeah, exactly. Right. And then it was all the smoothness washed away. But,
sure.
That's how I met my wife, and she's obviously been unbelievable. And I'm sure we'll talk about this at some point, but was announced Monday, June 20th last summer to replace Jean.
Right.
And on Thursday, June 23rd, she gave birth to our son Everett.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. And so
pretty good week.
Oh man, should have bought a lottery ticket. And so she is as good as it gets. There's no question.
How is having your two boys, how does that change? How has that changed your life, your outlook on things? Just the rhythm of your life.
Yeah, it's just everything, right? I mean, it's not all about you. I used to be I wouldn't say carefree person. That's not how I would describe it. Pretty relaxed, pretty laid back, and having two young kids, you start to worry about a lot more. You think harder about a lot more things and decisions and how they are affected. Even just how they're doing at school, how they're doing at daycare, what's going on. But so yeah, it's really changed. I've been so career focused and driven for 20 years. And, when Alexander was born, certainly, Everett really being a huge part of, the move here.
Yeah.
When he was born.
He will always be that part of that story, right? No matter what happens.
No matter what happens forever.
Yeah. All right. So your broadcasting career, as you've mentioned, covers time in Nebraska, West Virginia, and then eventually North Dakota State, calling different sports, having different responsibilities, developing all different kinds of content. So just quickly, kind of an overview of that journey and how all those things work together.
Yeah, it goes back to what we were talking about. I don't think I get this job, this opportunity, without those stops. And what I mean by that is this role here is still developing with the director of broadcasting title. So it's obviously the play-by-play, it's the games, but we're trying to create some new things and, some new content and, started a podcast down here, an audio podcast, doing some on-camera stuff with our administration, our coaches, and trying to tell the success stories of student athletes around Florida State right now. That's all the stuff I did everywhere else I'd been.
Okay.
And so Nebraska was producing, hosting, play-by-play, content creation, all of that stuff on camera at a younger age. West Virginia was literally building a property and helping build a radio network and developing affiliate relations from the ground up, along with play-by-play and some on-camera items. I created a podcast there that they're still doing right now, currently, an audio podcast. And then at NDSU in Fargo, we started a sports talk station from the ground up and built a radio station around the rise of the North Dakota State football program.
I bet that was fun.
It was fun. It was stressful, terrifying at times, but it developed into something that a lot of fans up there really enjoyed and continue to enjoy, as it obviously has continued on after I've left. And so
Florida State obviously was not just looking to replace a play-by-play person.
Correct.
They needed more skills, and you had those.
They were looking for something a little bit different, a little unique, I guess. And
right.
I think that helped me land this opportunity. And so, you go back and think about your path and the time, and you wonder if it's all worth it at times, right? When you're doing it. And,
sure.
Times are tough. You miss a holiday, you miss an event, the bank account isn't real full, and so it is funny how things work out if you believe and keep at it,
right.
Eventually at one point for you.
Yeah. Hey, everybody. Just a quick reminder that this episode is brought to you by Fiore Communications. Just like people, every business has a story to tell, and we've been helping our clients tell their story since 2001, because who you are as a company is just as important as what you do. To learn more about how telling your story can make a difference in your business, visit FioreCommunications.com. Thanks again for listening. Now back to the show. All right, so for those who don't know a lot about North Dakota State, this is not your typical FCS school. This is a powerhouse national champion multiple times.
Yeah.
So what was it like to be there? Especially, I guess you said you were kind of there during the rise of that time.
I got there in 2016. They had just won 5 in a row.
Okay.
So they were right in the middle of this unbelievable run. And they, much like here, they were looking for a little more. They ran, to a certain degree, Dave, they ran their football, and still do, like a Power 5 level program with how they fund it, how they travel, the fan support, the donor support, facilities. It's got Power 5 feel to it overall. And I think that's why you've seen them have the NFL caliber players that have come out of NDSU in the last 10, 12 years during this time frame. And so they were looking for a little more. I think they wanted some more daily content. They received some of that on the radio side with the station that we developed, and that worked out really, really well. But being around it, it taught me a lot of things about success. It taught me a lot of things about leadership. It taught me a lot of things about, you hear the word culture a lot and what makes a winner. And that was really where I started to understand why teams and why companies succeed. You got to have leaders at the top, but your people that are being coached or led also have to lead themselves and have to be ingrained, invested, and believe in what your goals and what your missions are. And that's really what I learned at NDSU with NDSU football. Getting to know Chris Kleiman, who's now the head coach at Kansas State, just won a Big 12 championship down there, took him to the Sugar Bowl. He was the first coach I worked with at NDSU, and just an amazing person and an unbelievable leader and coach. You got to set the example, but your players really have to police themselves and hold each other accountable. And that's what I really learned about championship level success. And that's what I'm seeing with Mike Norvell right now.
I was going to say, you're seeing it happen all over again, right?
And so I'm seeing it with Mike Norvell. I'm getting the same feel I had when I was at NDSU with how coaches developed this culture, and you're seeing all of these great players and great young men come back and want to play here. And Coach made a comment on our, some of our booster tour stops the last, month and a half or so, where somebody said to him, hey, you only had one guy drafted in the NFL, Jamie Robinson of the Panthers, and he kind of laughed. He goes, yeah.
Because they all came back.
We had 7 or 8 guys come back that would have got drafted. He goes, I'm loving it. It's the first time a coach has said he only had one guy drafted. It's great. It's not a knock on the program.
The opposite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so those were the things I learned. And I'll just say, I've said this many times, Fargo, the first thing you think of is the movie, the weather, the winter. And don't get me wrong.
It's cold.
It's cold. I can't describe it to you. It is. And the snow is not fun. But the people there are unbelievable. They are just unbelievable. I mean, you hear the term shirt off your back. They take the coat off their backs in the middle of a blizzard for you if you didn't have one. And we love Fargo. We love the people. We have friends up there still. And we were really happy, Dave, like really comfortable. And in a place, I remember driving home, and my goal has always been to get to the highest level and get to a place as prestigious as Florida State. And I remember it was probably year 4, year 5 of the 6 years I was there, and I was driving home, and this is fine. Like, I could do this. This is all right. And so we loved it up there, and still to this day, stay connected as much as we can.
So how did you get connected to the FSU job? How did that come up?
So certainly everybody knows, like, Gene Deckerhoff, you don't need to describe it any further, right? You just say Gino.
Right.
And in fact, I was mowing my lawn, cutting grass, Labor Day night, 2021, Sunday night, listening to Gene, bar none, and Tom on the I think the Varsity Network app, and listening to those guys call the game against Notre Dame,
right,
inside of Doak. And been listening to Gene for a while. I told this story before. Had Gene on my radio show when I was in Nebraska.
Yeah. And
Gene, just introduced Gene and said, Gino, how's it going? How you doing? And Gene went into how the summer's been great and spent time with Bobby Bowden last night, and we drank a couple cool drinks and had a shrimp boil and rode on his boat. And I'm like, he just said that, and it stuck with me for whatever reason, where I wasn't doing a ton of play-by-play then. I didn't really understand what that role was, Dave, and it made me really realize at that time that how important relationships were, and that I really wanted to develop those and find that connection in this career path. And so it would have been March of last year, and Gene announced his retirement and saw it on social media. And from there, I knew that, Florida State, obviously growing up watching Florida State every weekend, the great teams under Coach Bowden in the 80s and 90s and early 2000s, and
the dynasty
years, and just the great players, and always stuck with me. One of the great brands, if not the greatest brand in college athletics, and one of the best in all of sports. And so I knew that Florida State was a place that, in my career, if the opportunity came open, I would love to take a swing at it. I'd love to try and be a part of that family. So it started in mid-March. I reached out to the head of broadcasting for Learfield. His name is Tom Bowman. Late March, early April, and I said, "Look," I said, "I don't know what the situation is. I'm not sure if you have a guy in mind already." I said, "If you don't," I said, "I want the job." I said, "I think I would do a great job for it. I think I would be a great fit, and I want the job. And so I just want to let you know that I'm very interested, and I hope you keep me in mind."
Yeah.
And so we had that conversation, and it really just kind of grew from there. And you go back to connections. I made sure to try and connect myself really early on in the process with Michael Alford through people that we both knew in college athletics. Also a great friend of mine, his name is Todd Nisley. He is the general manager of the Learfield property at Ohio State. We worked together at West Virginia. We're in each other's weddings. He reached out to my GM here now, Caleb Swan, and I just needed to get on the radar, because my path, obviously coming from North Dakota State to Florida State, you had to get on the radar. You
Sure.
weren't well known amongst the fans or people in Tallahassee. And so that was my goal at the start. And then from there, I just felt like if I could get in the room and have a conversation, that I'd give myself a shot. And so we had a Zoom interview with Michael and Caleb Swan and Peter Collins, the president of the Florida State Board of Trustees, and Tom and Chris Ferris. And that went very, very well. I was a finalist for an on-campus visit on June 8th of last year. That was a Thursday. Found out on Friday that I was the next voice of the Seminoles after that. And as we mentioned before, I had to keep it quiet for 11 or 12 days, which was probably one of the more stressful times of my life.
It's like winning a reality TV show or something,
yes.
Right? You couldn't tell anybody.
Trying to pass the test.
So what were those emotions? I mean, what was going through your head when you realized that? I know there was probably some bittersweet because you really liked Fargo, like you said, but this really truly an opportunity of a
Yeah.
lifetime was before you.
Right. A lot of emotions. Sarah was close to having Everett, right? And so that was going on. And I certainly said, hey, when we first started, I said, you got to tell me if this is bad timing, because it obviously isn't great timing, right? And she has just been so supportive, and she's basically like, this is your dream, go get it, go after it. And so with her support, I went after it. And there were a lot of emotions. It was just, moving you to tears. I told a friend of mine who I only told a few people, and he was emotional for me about when I got it, right? And so it was hard because you wanted to tell the world and you couldn't do it, and you knew that this was sort of not a test, but if you let it slip, that your new employer is not going to be very happy that this gets out. And so there was a little of that. It was stressful. And, I think there is always a little bit of, without not knowing and not being there and doing it, hey, am I going to be able to do the job justice following somebody like Gene, who's been doing football for 43 years and basketball for 48? That's a big responsibility.
Right. And truly beloved and part of the community and the whole thing.
Yes. Yeah. And so I had I had some experience with that at NDSU when a legend at NDSU, his name's Scott Miller, passed away sadly due to melanoma. And that's how that opportunity became available. And he did it for 25 years and was the voice of the rise in the Division I era at NDSU. So there was some different experiences there with that role as well. But, let's be honest, this is Florida State. And this is a whole different category overall. And so a lot of emotions, excitement, elation, certainly feeling like you've accomplished your dream, but also at the same time understanding that, all right, let's keep this quiet. I've got another child coming, so there's that going on. Now we got to move. Now we got to do all this with the newborn. So there's a lot of things going through your mind around this time last June.
Sure. Did you know anything about Tallahassee when you made this decision?
No, not really. That was one of the questions that Peter Collins asked me. He just said, what do you know about Tallahassee? I go, look, I'm not going to lie to you. I don't know anything about Tallahassee. I know it's a great town. It's a college town. My site visit was the first time I'd ever been to Tallahassee in my life. And I said, look, I don't know anything, but I didn't know anything about Lincoln. I didn't know anything about Morgantown. I didn't know anything about Fargo. But what I've been able to do, and what I think is very important, is I've been able to connect in the community, get to know people, and do the best job that I can in ingraining myself into the Florida State family and the Tallahassee family. I just spoke yesterday, Dave, at the Northside Kiwanis Club with those great folks there at Presbyterian Church at 6:45 in the morning. Yeah. And so that's important. That stuff's important, right? And so I didn't know anything about it. Knew the people here would be outstanding, and they have been when they didn't need to be, which has been just a joy and a blast this past year overall. And so still learning. Still understanding, but certainly loving living here in Tallahassee and getting to know the state of Florida and the Panhandle, and also enjoying being able to say, hey, you want to go to the beach today? And drive 50 minutes down to Alligator Beach and send the boys down there and run around in the sand for a little bit.
Yeah, a little different than before. So are you looking forward to your second season, having one under your belt?
I really am. I've already started digging in on the first game with LSU on September 3rd. 80 days as we record it from now is that first game. Going back to Orlando, pretty unique, right? Where both teams finished their previous seasons in the same stadium on a neutral site, and are going to open the next year in the same stadium,
right?
On a neutral site with the bowl games for both Florida State and LSU. I'm looking forward to it. Still going to be some firsts, obviously. Playing at Boston College, playing at Clemson, playing at Pitt, playing at Wake, playing at Florida. I've never been to those venues. And so still, it's a year of firsts in a lot of regards. And I knew, just like some of my other stops, there's going to be a lot of transition. There's going to be a lot of first-time moments. It's going to take a few years to, I think, really, really feel comfortable.
Right.
Like everything is not brand new overall, but I'm looking forward to all the new opportunities as well at the same time and embracing those chances.
Right. Well, speaking of not getting a chance to get comfortable, last year you started with a warm-up game with Duquesne, and then you're thrust into the LSU game that had a wild and unexpected finish. So, and your call kind of became something.
Yeah.
So tell me about that experience and the end of that game. I mean, that was just really nuts.
Well, I'm glad that you remember that we played Duquesne because a lot of people don't. You know, everybody I talk to people in these
we had
venues,
the week 0 game.
Yeah,
right?
people go, "Oh, what a great one for your first one." I go, "Oh yeah, but we did that." Okay, never mind.
Right.
You know, and of course in the Duquesne game we have a 90-minute weather delay.
Right.
Why would we not on a Saturday at 5 p.m. in Tallahassee?
It's a weird start
in August, right?
Yeah.
So lightning. So all the prep work got used for that first broadcast. The irony, Dave, is in my first year at NDSU, I had one of those moments as well in my third game. And that was when North Dakota State beat the Iowa Hawkeyes at Kinnick Stadium in 2016 with a walk-off field goal. And I had the opportunity to have a big call, was fortunate enough that I felt like I got it. It went kind of viral and hit ESPN and social media and national radio. And same thing for this one. You never know, but you just have to be ready to go. And that's part of kind of how I try to approach all of these games that I do. Like, you just don't know, especially in college athletics. Anything can happen. 18 to 23, 24-year-old young men, goofy things go down.
Right.
It's a little different, a little unique, and that was one of those games.
Right.
That night. Yeah.
So do the call for us real quick, and what actually did you say?
Yeah, so I
first it was snap hole block.
So I remember that it starts with the drive before where unfortunately we fumble on the one.
Right.
I think the game's over.
Away.
Right? I think the game's over. Malik Neighbors muffs his second punt of the night. It's recovered by Brendan Gann at the 8. There's 3 minutes left. It's over. It's 24-17. I felt like we've been the better team all night. We punch it in. You're done dealing.
Right.
So I'm starting to feel good, not relaxing, but feeling good. And we fumble. And you're like, oh my goodness. Like, okay, they're at the 1, and you're thinking, well, 99 yards in a minute and 40 with our defense tonight, going to be hard. All of a sudden, Jane Daniels goes to work. 66 yards rushing, 33 yards passing.
He's pretty good.
He's not bad. We have the play on the sideline that gets reviewed, and nobody knows what's going on. The officials don't know what's going on.
That was a
nobody
botched
knows.
call.
It was a botched call.
Yeah.
I later found out. I called the head of officiating for the entire NCAA. I said, "Hey, how's this supposed to go?" And essentially, what he told me was that's a play that is actually not reviewable. And so it shouldn't have gone to review. And so ultimately, he's like, in a roundabout way, they kind of got it right, he said. I said, all right, anyway. So that was a bizarre time. They throw the touchdown pass, Jeray Jenkins back of the end zone. And so you're like, okay, are they going to go for 2?
Which they should have.
But then it's funny, I'm literally watching the LSU-Alabama game yesterday to watch some LSU stuff.
Right.
And Brian Kelly did that. He went for 2 in overtime. He wasn't going to kick the extra point. I would imagine that experience in New Orleans led to that decision to go for 2 and win the game at home against Alabama, and they did.
Right.
But he decides to kick the extra point, and in my mind, I'm just thinking, just be ready for any. Don't assume that this is just done, right? I'm thinking that, and I'm thinking it could be a bad snap. It could be a botch hold. Just be ready.
Be ready.
And as I'm making the call, here, 24-23, here's a chance to send this to free football. Damian Ramos, who's a redshirt freshman, walk-on, might be the most nervous person in the Superdome right now. Snap, spot, and Shaheem Brown comes through. It's blocked. Bar Nunn's loving it. He's doing his thing.
Yeah, he forgets
He's doing it.
Yeah,
and that's the beauty.
He's being a fan right
yeah,
there,
that's the
which
beauty.
is why we love him.
Yes, exactly. It's who William Floyd is. He's so passionate about the Noles, and his love for Florida State is just huge.
Yep.
And so we're both, blocked, and it's no good. And I wait for the opportunity because William is excited. And so I'm not trying to fight him to get the call out. And so once he kind of he pauses with his excitement, that's when I go. Shaheem Brown, and the other part to it too is I guessed on who blocked it.
Okay.
Because how can you see
That's a good spotter, to tell you that.
Well,
quick.
it was, and Andy Surratt is a great spotter, but I was lucky enough earlier in the game that Jared Verse had blocked a field goal.
Right.
And he had raised his hand. The guy that blocked it usually is running raising his hand like he got it. And so Verse did that earlier in the game. And I'm trying to find somebody on the field in the middle of the celebration that's looking similar. And Shaheem Brown is running down the LSU sideline with guys chasing him, and he's got his hand in the air. And I just went with it.
Yeah.
Could have been wrong. Could have been somebody else, but I just trusted it, and I went with it. There was so much going on. And I said, Shaheem Brown got his mitt on it, and then I went to fire up the war chant and plant the spear. Noles win. Shaheem Brown's the hero. Mike Norvell, here's your signature win early on in non-conference play. You're not going to keep the Noles off of Bourbon Street tonight, baby. And there it was.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah.
And it's scary, too, when you go back and look. That ball almost went over the crossbar.
It hit the crossbar.
Yeah. It was like 2 inches from going over.
I left that part out because it was so – but I was watching, Dave. I did see it, and I was,
He got just enough of it.
It was close. It was very – very close. You're right. It almost crawled over to tie the game.
Well, that's awesome. So in your head, like when you're planning, I mean, you shifted from, okay, we can kind of coast a little bit, we're going to win, to anything can happen, be ready.
Yeah.
So I guess that's where the experience comes in, over many years at this point, that you knew to keep your head together, let William do his thing, kind of collect your thoughts. Yeah. And then, because you're only going to get one chance at it, sort of like an Al Michaels moment, right? You're only going to get one shot. I mean, this isn't quite the same level, but to FSU fans, we hadn't had a win like that in a long time, right? So it meant a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been asked the question, where does that call come from? And you got a lot of windshield time from Fargo to Tallahassee, and so there was a lot of brainstorming going on, and I think every play-by-play guy wants to have some kind of a hook, whether it's a touchdown call, whether it's a final call. When I was at NDSU, the social media hashtag there is horns up. And so I went with horns up, and, whoever we were playing, horns up, jackrabbits down, the Bison win another national championship, whatever, right? And so I wanted to have something here. And I called my dad. I said, hey, what do you think of this? He's like, no. I go, what do you think of this? He's like, no. I said, what do you think of fire up the war chant and plant the spear? And there was a pause, and he goes, I like it.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, that's the one.
Yeah.
And so I'm just going to go with it.
Yeah.
And it got to SportsCenter that night.
SVP had it on,
SVP had it on. Yeah. National radio caught it on Monday, the next day. And so, and then social media, obviously that's a big part. I tell people now that, obviously the live action is important, but the moments like that's where the social media digital platforms come into play, because now that's how a lot of people are going to find those types of moments is on that platform. Yeah. And so that's why you need to be ready. You need to have it right, because that's where you're going to recycle and reuse
for sure
over and over.
Yeah, you do not want a boom goes the dynamite moment.
No, you don't. That's not going to probably hit as well.
All right, Jeff, looking back, what is the one thing or person that has changed or altered the trajectory of your life to this point?
It's a lot of people. You take pieces of all your experiences with you wherever you're at. Obviously, my parents with their support my dad with his passion and competitive drive and support fueled me to be, I always wanted to be great. He pushed me in the right direction. I've had great friends in the business who have helped me grow and guided me along the way. Lane Grendel is Bob Euchre's right-hand man on Brewers broadcast right now. He's a great friend. Greg Sharp's the play-by-play voice in Nebraska. He's a great friend. Matt Davison is a person who has been a friend and mentor and guiding me about how the business works. When I was at Nebraska, all sorts of people at West Virginia, from people within administration, Matt Wells, athletic directors, Todd Nisley, as I talked about him earlier, coaches, so many coaches that have created opportunities. At NDSU, the owner of my radio stations, Jim Ingstad, Nancy Odney, there's not just one person. I wish I could single out one.
You were doing a horrible job at picking one person.
I really am. But it's not, for me, it's not just one.
Yeah.
It might be different for others, but it's been a lot of people. There's been a lot of people along the way that have impacted me. Chris Ferris, Tom Bowman, with Learfield and IMG, with opportunities, and mentor Sean McDonough has been someone that I've leaned on for help and advice. And
I forgot to mention that you do call FSU basketball too.
I do. Yeah.
So kind of a rough year, some injuries and things happened this last year, but lots of optimism, bringing in some great guys from the portal. It looks like. So
I'll tell you what, you got
Coach Ham's as good as it gets.
You talk about impact. I mean, Mike Norvell, Michael Alford has been very impactful because it was his decision on who is going to replace Gene Deckerhoff. That's a big call, and I think Michael has shown a track record of doing a great job hiring coaches and people, and I'm glad that he thought that I was worthy of this role. Yeah. And so, basketball, I love basketball. I've been a huge fan. I've really felt like over the years that Florida State basketball has been not under the radar, but deserves more love than what it has gotten because it's not a quote-unquote blue blood.
Right.
But it's a great program. It's just such a bummer that the COVID year knocked out one of the greatest seasons in Florida State basketball history.
I know Dick Vitale picked us to win it all that year. Yeah.
Yes. And so, the last couple of years have not been up to Coach Ham's standards. But, I got to go over to workouts a couple weeks ago and saw him and talked to him for about 10 minutes. And he's really excited about the guys they've brought in, the guys that are getting healthy. Jalen Gainey, who we didn't see at all last year, is getting healthier. Cam Fletcher as well. I think you're going to see that Leonard Hamilton prototypical-led Florida State basketball team this upcoming season that as guys get back to 100%, they're going to play defensively and with the pace and passion the way that he wants them to play. And that's what's exciting for Coach Ham, Stan Jones, Steve Smith, this entire staff, Kevin Nickelberry's in his first year, about what's coming up for Florida State basketball. It's going to be great.
That'll be fun. All right, final question. The podcast is named How I Got Here.
Yeah.
We've talked about how you got to this point in your life. Where do you think here might be for you in 3 to 5 years from now?
We're not going anywhere, Dave. This is the dream job. I'm looking forward to my family growing up in Tallahassee. I will say that someone that's always looked for what's next, how do I get better, it's been, I wouldn't say emotionally different, but knowing that your hard work has paid off, where does that what's next angle in your life happen? And I think for me, it's continuing to be the best broadcaster person I can be, right? But also being the best dad, best husband. I focused so much on my career over the last 20 years that now the work has paid off. It doesn't stop, certainly. But, what's next? What's up in, what's coming up in the next 3 to 5 years? Being the best dad I can be to my 2 boys, being the best husband to Sarah, creating the best life I possibly can for all of us with the impact that I can have. I think that's what's next for me and what's going on in the next 3 to 5 years.
Thanks for listening to the show. You can subscribe at Apple Podcast, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, please leave us a review. It really does make a difference. Thanks to my amazing staff at Fiore Communications, who pick up the slack while I'm working on these podcasts, and to Troy Bloom for composing our theme music. You can hear more of Troy's creations on Facebook and Instagram at Troy Bloom Music. To connect with the podcast or suggest a future guest, follow us on social media or email us at podcast@fiorecommunications.com.